Good morning, Year 4. Welcome to your second English session. I'm going to go through the slides, the same as we did yesterday, and open up and start sharing my screen with you and talk through what we're going to do. I hope you're all well. Let me just start sharing my screen for you. Okay, here we go. So today's lesson, we are going to be recognising the features of suspense and tension within a text. Okay, and we're going to do that by reading and researching. And why? So that we can write our own narrative using a class text as inspiration. Now, the narrative that we're going to write, we're actually planning for a couple of weeks' time. The teaching that we're going to do today is getting us all ready to be writing our own narrative for a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so that's the way we're going to do it. I'm going to put myself here, that way I can see it on the camera and look like I'm looking at here. So first things first, today's is Tuesday, the 12th of January. I don't really actually need you to write this bit down today, so we're not going to work in your books today, unless you want it. There's not really much to write. This is more kind of thinking and saying it out loud. So we're going to recognise the features of suspense and tension. But before we can recognise those features, we need to firstly understand what is suspense and what is tension. So, starting with tension. Tension is something that writers use to create a problem in their stories. It'd be very boring if a story is very predictable and goes exactly the way that you expect it to go, because you're going to start reading, you know, I know exactly what's going to happen at the end. I don't need to read the middle bit. So what writers would do, what authors would do, they will add tension in their stories in order to create a problem to make it more interesting. You know, tension means feeling worry, fear, nerves, or pressure. So when you're reading a really good book, for example, when we were reading our Narnia book last term, we'd all watched the films, we've all seen it, most of us already had. So we knew that was going to happen. But even when we read the book, because the author used different ways of making us feel worry when Aslan was put on the stone table, or scared that something was going to happen, we knew when the White Witch was coming. Okay, we knew she was a bad character. It didn't stop us from feeling nervous or fear for all the other characters, and that's because the author has used this thing called tension. Okay, you can also create tension between two characters if they are arguing. So, for example, when we read Narnia again, we had at the beginning where Peeta and Edmund were arguing. Okay, so we had this tension. We knew that these two characters didn't really get along. Okay, and here we can start to recognise tension, which we will do tomorrow in our actual class text between Varjak and Julius. Okay, the tension is where you're feeling worried, nervous, or pressure, either for that something is going to happen or between two characters. Okay, so when you've got your class text in front of you, you can pause the video here. Can you spot an example in the text where the author has tried to use tension in order to get you to feel worried, nervous, or pressure between two characters? Okay, pause it here. Okay, so hopefully you've gone to the point where in chapter 1, Varjak and his brother are squaring up to each other. Varjak, knowing that his brother's a bit older than him, a bit bigger than him, is trying to show his muscles, whereas actually Varjak is smaller, and he tries to square up because he's so angry. So that's the tension between those two characters. Okay. The other part of our what is suspense. Okay, so suspense is something that is used in stories to make them mysterious or scary. So instead of making you feel worried or spotting worry between two characters, this is actually kind of, you know, something is coming, but you're not sure what. It's what the author is going to use to kind of make you feel a bit on the edge of your seat. Okay, suspense means waiting for something to happen or being uncertain about something is going to happen. So you might know the author is trying to get you to feel a little bit on the edge of your seat, a little bit scared, okay, anticipating that something bad is going to come. It's like if you're watching a film and you know it all goes quiet, you know something's going to come and it's going to make you jump, and then it does still make you jump. Even though you're anticipating it, you're waiting for it to happen, it still catches you by surprise when it does. Okay, so can you, again, pause it here and see if you can have a look through that first chapter. Can you find any examples of suspense being used in that first chapter in our book? Okay, so you might have spotted in the book where he's ready to go outside. So where Varjak is waiting, all his parents are asleep, everybody else is getting busy and doing something else, and he's seen the cat flap, he's ready to go outside. That's the suspense. You're waiting for him to just get outside. But something else happens. His mother wakes up and stops him from going out. That's just a short bit of suspense, just in that first little chapter as an example. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to have a read of this part here. Now, this isn't from our book. This is from a completely different piece of text. Okay, but I want you to have a think, have a read through this. What features make this writing full of suspense? So how do the authors do it? Okay, so for example, if I'm reading this, I can see lots of different ways of using their senses. So the author is describing the eyes, what the eyes look like, the palms being sweaty. Above her head, the trees stood like dark giants, impending doom. Okay, so what I want you to do is I'm going to read through it in a second. I want you to think, what kind of features, what kind of grammatical features can you hear that make this writing full of suspense? How is the author making us feel on the edge of our seat? She arrived at the door and everything went cold. Her skin tightened, her eyes were wide, her palms were sweaty. Above her head, the trees stood like dark giants of impending doom, looming over her with many reaching arms. A loud rustling broke the silence, and a smell like damp wood filled her nostrils. She lifted her hand to knock on the door, but before she could touch it, it creaked open. Okay, so what kind of things did you spot? You can pause the video here if you like and jot down some of those thoughts, or tell somebody in your house what you think the features are. Okay, and I'm going to show you in a second. Did you spot? Similes and metaphors. So we've got loud rustling broke the silence, smell like damp wood. So when we've got the like, smell like damp wood, we've got our similes. Did you spot the use of ellipses? Now, an ellipsis is where it pauses. Can you spot any ellipses in there? It might not be in this part, but that's what you're looking out for in our class text as well. Short, snappy sentences. Her eyes were wide, her skin tightened. Normally at school we're saying add extra details in your sentences, but sometimes authors like to use just very short, simple sentences to create this sense of tension. Okay, and using sentences that appeal to the senses. So when we said about describing what the eyes look like, how her palms are feeling, the touch. Okay, thinking about your five senses, your touch and smell and hearing and what you can see and what it feels like inside. Okay, so we're just going to go into a little bit of detail for how these actually create suspense on here. So a simile and metaphors add a further description, which helps the reader to paint a detailed picture in their mind. Okay, so basically we're giving lots more information. So for example, here, a loud rustling broke the silence and a smell like damp wood filled their nostrils. You can imagine yourself stood in this room and you can imagine this smell. You can imagine the way the room looks by just using these similes and metaphors. Okay, the ellipsis shows a long pause, which can be used as a cliffhanger. So the reader wonders what happens next. It also pauses in the middle of an action to create a sense of hesitation about the outcome. If you were writing about a TV talent show result, you would use the ... the ellipses, quite a lot. Now, there aren't any examples of ellipses in this part of the text, but you will find them. See if you can find them in our class text. Can you go through and find any examples of the ellipses or any examples in any of your books at home? Any books that you think that actually that made me feel on edge or on the edge of my seat, maybe in Narnia. Can you find any of these examples? Short sentences are read quickly, one after the other, so the pace of the story quickens. It makes the reader feel like they are panicking or breathing more quickly. Okay, and that's the same. When I was reading it, her skin tightened, her eyes were wide, her palms were sweaty. Then I've got to slow down for above her head because I've got a pause in there. But when it's a short, snappy sentence, it does. You're feeling like it's speeding up. Okay, have a read through some of the books at home, your books at home. Do you notice where they use short, snappy sentences? Does it make you feel like you're having to quicken up the pace of your reading? And finally, using the senses, gives us more detailed point of view of the situation. Again, like the similar metaphor, the idea of this room smelling damp and dreary. Okay, you can kind of get the idea that this room is old and horrible and abandoned. Okay, it brings the reader into the story by feeding their imagination. It gives you a real clear picture in your head. Okay, so those are all the features of tension and suspense. Those are all the features that an author would use to create these feelings when the reader is reading. What's going to happen tomorrow is you're going to use everything that we've learned about today, and you're going to start to look for these kind of features, these grammatical features within the text, our class text within Rajat-Kaur. Okay, so hopefully by now you've got a really good idea of what tension and suspense looks like and how a reader uses it. Please do go and read some of your books at home, maybe read Narnia, maybe even read In a Place Called Perfect. A Place Called Perfect from my very first term was brilliant for tension and suspense. Okay, so go and have a read of that. Can you spot these things? Or is there anything else? Maybe you can tell me if there's any others that maybe I've not written on here. Are there another feature that you think worked really well and that I've not put on here? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And that is it for your English session today. Again, not much writing. It's kind of a lot more me teaching you just the features of it, ready for tomorrow's learning in order to spot them yourself. Okay, hope you are well, and I will see you very soon.